project advisor, which was like the easiest job of all time because Scarlett just like, she was on it this entire project. I'm really excited to introduce her to share her American Girl doll project. She asked me to advise because she wanted to pick dolls, people from history to then kind of show in their American Girl doll form. Scarlett was incredible all year. She had like her idea right off the bat. She always knew exactly what she needed to do next. She's been working on this consistently since school started. So if you've seen her like out at the track or something with a doll, like taking a photo or something, that was why. So I'm really proud of her. Let's all give her a round of applause.
So yeah, thank you all for coming to my presentation. I'm pretty proud of the project I was able to make. If you read the description for the toy sheets or just kind of sitting around campus with a doll, I made my own American Girl doll magazine with a new line of dolls featuring real women in history and myself as the doll of the year. So I know I put a couple of magazines on tables that you can look at and flip throughout my presentation. But if you're interested, I know she just said,
oh yeah, sorry.
It's away. If you want to scan this QR code and just see the final product of what I made, this should work. And I'll give everyone a second if you want to do that.
Yes, sir, you are allowed to get your phone back out if you want to scan this so you can follow along in her magazine.
Works perfectly.
It does?
Yes.
Emily made that one. Yes. I didn't know that was like a thing that you could just make, to be honest. I was really
That's
impressed.
not one contribution of
Is everyone good at that? Alex, you guys? Okay, so I want to start off with the biggest piece of inspiration for this project, which was this first opening scene in the Barbie movie that I'm going to play now. It was the most compelling part of this whole movie for me, so I didn't think it was good to not share it.
Since the beginning of time, since the first little girl ever existed, there have been dolls. But the dolls were always and forever baby dolls. The girls who played with them could only ever play at being mothers, which can be fun, at least for a while anyway. Ask your mother. This continued until
because it was really a big piece of inspiration for this project, and it was kind of the very first opening scene in the movie where we realized that it wasn't just Barbie Princess and the Pauper live action with hot actors, but rather kind of this exploration of girlhood and feminism through the means of our dolls. And that's exactly what I aimed.
I want to advance.
Maybe just, I think you click one more time on this just screen.
Maybe here. There it
Okay.
is. Do you know how I can make it possible?
You need to go back to the video.
Yeah.
Go back to view. Nope.
I'm kind of cool with that. Which is exactly what I was trying to do with this project. I wanted to talk about American Girl dolls because I think that that clip is exactly right and that Barbie was totally revolutionary in the toy industry, especially how it pertains to little girls because it introduced a doll that you can play with not as a mother but as a role model. But I want to take it a step further and argue that American Girl did the same thing by creating a companion doll, something that was age appropriate and both educational, and I wanted to explore different means of representing women through dolls, and that kind of played out through history in real women. So I chose a couple of dolls to represent in my project, and there were 3 pillars that I considered and who I picked. My first step was Googling niche women in history because I wanted to be able to tell stories that weren't necessarily already told, and for a person to be able to pick up my magazine and learn something more than what was just taught in their history class. Another thing that was really important to me in this process was diversity. I wanted to show dolls from a variety of backgrounds, both racially and kind of the things that were important to them in their lives. So I have a doll that in performing arts, the military, and athletics. And then I also had some constraints of actually working with dolls. So could I afford to buy this doll? Because I just kind of made it a point about accessibility in terms of age-appropriate companionship, but these dolls are incredibly expensive, and their clothing can also be expensive as well. So I was working with some constraints there. These are the women that I ultimately chose to represent my magazine. This first woman is Catherine Spitzer. She was the first official woman to run the Boston Marathon. The next woman is Susan Uncuddy. She was the first female gunnery officer in the Waves program in World War II. And then lastly, that's Rita Marino. You might recognize her from her screen work. So the typical steps that I followed in creating the doll. I'm going to flip through this magazine to show you. So I started out with researching the doll, gathering a basic understanding of their life story, and then I picked one facet of their life to research at a macro level. So for this doll, who was the first woman to run the Boston Marathon, I found other important women in running and pioneers for females in running, and researched and read about them. This is Wilma Rudolph. She was a very, very fast sprinter, but it's a really fun story. She was born with polio, and she was told she was never going to be able to walk. Then she became one of the fastest women in history. And this is Bobby Gibbs. She was the first woman to unofficially run the Boston Marathon. And then I got to look into dress up, which was so much fun. I made a magazine that was trying to mimic the styles of that era. So what you might see in a women's magazine in the 1960s is what I was trying to portray here with the colors and the styles. I talk about what this woman probably would have worn in general, how that might have changed because of the sport that she was involved in, and ultimately why I decided to put her in what I did. And then I was able to take photos of dolls in places that made sense for their story. So for Catherine Switzer, this is her in a track actually in New England because she ran the Boston Marathon. And then write a short biography on them that ultimately ended in a quick description of kind of their legacy. So for her, I had her go to a track meet with the girls team, and they took some photos with her, and that was really fun to kind of flat staying her around. Some of the issues that I faced in this project was when I was finding dolls, I always went to eBay or Facebook Marketplace to try to find them discounted and pre-owned. And it was really difficult for me to find Asian American girl dolls. They're like collectible items that just were not in my price range whatsoever. And also American girl dolls in general are really, really expensive. This is a line of historical dolls. The doll itself will cost about $115, and it's about $40 for the outfit on top of that. So it's not super financially accessible, which wasn't super great for this project. So I turned to my family for donations. I gathered all my cousins and aunts on a group chat, and on Christmas morning, they all brought these dolls for me. And I'm very, very grateful. They're probably the reason this project was able to get finished. And I thought this was a funny photo, just bins of dolls. And then another thing that was difficult for me is I think representing these women as dolls has some inherently comedic aspects to them, and I wanted to make sure that I was kind of doing justice and maintaining their integrity when I was portraying these sometimes discriminatory events or violent experiences that they had to endure. And so I hoped I walked that line well in my magazine. For example, this is Susan Uncuddy. She's got a Nerf gun, toy world. And here are some of my favorite photos that I took. This is Study Hall doll, I call her. This is my sister biting her head off. And I love this picture on a beach in Maine. I feel like that's the kind of thing you post on like Instagram or something, and I thought it was funny that it was a doll. So that's kind of the end of my quick presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions or go into more depth. This is my doll, by the way. This is Scarlett doll.
We have plenty of time for questions. So who wants to hear more about something? Yes?
Is Scarlett doll wearing a Gemini necklace?
Scarlett doll is not wearing a Gemini necklace. She has a folklore cardigan. Actually, one of the pages in my magazine was dressed like Scarlett, where I
I saw
included my typical accessories. So these rings of the necklace were a part of that.
I don't know who Addison without a Gemini necklace.
Nora?
At the beginning of the magazine, it says for my grandma. So what is?
Yeah. Well, my grandma was the one who actually first bought me the doll. And I remember going to American Girl Cafe with her. And then my other grandma would sew me and Juliet matching outfits to the dolls. And so I think a lot of my experiences with these dolls and dolls in general come from these feminine figures in my life. And so I don't think this project would have ever happened without them. So I thought it was important to dedicate it to them. Tim?
What's like one of your favorite, like in terms of researching these women from history? For example, like why did you either like what was something surprising? What was something like your favorite kind of little fun fact that you found or rabbit hole you went down?
One thing that I think, if you have a magazine in front of you and you want to turn to the West Side Story page that I made, when I was first researching Rita Marino for this project, I kind of made the mistake of thinking that West Side Story, because it portrayed Puerto Rican people, was super revolutionary for Latinx in that community in performing arts. And I did like basically no research and found that's absolutely not the case, and the very, very real racist aspects of that show that I just was not totally familiar with. But I think my favorite thing was Rita Marino in the movie. It's one of the in the 1960s was the only person of color who was a part of that Puerto Rican group in the movie. And then at the new revival of it in 2021, she sang Somewhere Called, and one of the lyrics is "There's a place for us," and I thought that was just the sweetest, most compelling kind of thing ever. And so that was probably like my favorite story that I was able to read about in history. Miller.
Was it hard for you to narrow down some way to research, or was it like this person's perfect?
Sort of. I originally, instead of Rita Marino, was planning on doing Cheetah Rivera because she had just died and I thought I could honor her legacy there. But I realized it just wasn't as good to write about for me personally. I thought Rita Marino was better. But Catherine Switzer and Susan Cuddy, I was pretty sure about. I remember our first meeting, I was like, I want to do these two dolls. So it was relatively easy to narrow that down. Juliet?
What doll was the hardest?
Susan Cuddy was very, very hard because I wanted her to have a women's naval outfit in a doll form from the 1940s. And that doesn't exist. So I was able to get her a coat that was a navy coat that was actually for a doll in the 1940s. And then I was also really struggling with ways that I could portray her. So going to Camp Mabry was an option, a lot of different things. And I ended up putting her in front of a world map with a Nerf gun that I got from the senior lock-in. So that one was probably the hardest to portray, just because clothes don't really come in doll form to begin with. So it was kind of hard to find that. Yes?
So this was your first time making a magazine. What
Yes.
about the process of making the magazine was like the most challenging or interesting for you?
Well, I was using Canva for the first time ever. I'd never used Canva before. And so kind of just learning and navigating that program was challenging, but the learning curve was pretty easy. I was able to get on it quickly. I did get a Canva Pro subscription briefly and then canceled it. And then I got it again and I canceled it. So that was part of it. The printing process was super easy. I just clicked print with Canva, and they had a lot of checks to make sure that everything printed cleanly and all of my text and images were printed well. So it was pretty easy to actually make the magazine part, even though I was new to these design spreads and just the application in general.
I've got a quick, is the idea of the magazine connected to like the written material that often comes with American Girl dolls?
Yes. Yeah, I thought that the portrayal of women in history and myself lent itself well to American Girl dolls better than Barbie. Barbie actually has a line of inspiring women dolls where they show real women in history, but they don't really write about them the same way that American Girl has like books written on each of their figures. So I thought that would be a really excellent medium for that.
Can you talk a little bit more too about the equity portion of it? Because I know, like, for myself, I have a daughter, and I used to, like, grab the American Girl catalogs out of the mail and put them in recycling before she could see them. Because they were too expensive. I
Yes.
couldn't afford them. So-
Exactly. They are very, very, very expensive. And I think that they kind of cater to a very specific demographic because of that as a result. I think that there's something equitable about them only in a representation way. They show people from a variety of races, socioeconomic backgrounds, and also in an age-appropriate and educational way, and I think that's awesome. But definitely, my aunt, one of the dolls that she gave me was the Samantha doll, and she had told her daughter one day that you don't always get what you want. I always wanted an American Girl doll, and I never got one. And then her husband, she's like a full-grown adult, bought her that Samantha doll for Christmas. Like now she's like a grown woman, she got to finally get that doll. So they definitely are not accessible financially at all. So I think that's definitely an important part to include in this project. I was reading a lot of parent magazines when I was doing research just about American Girl dolls in general, and the ways one of the women actually said one of the only things she likes about American Girl dolls is that they're not sluts, which sounds crazy, right? But that they actually don't. Barbies don't have enough body fat to menstruate. And most of these dolls, and it's a big part of the Barbie plot, have like these crazy heels on and stuff.
Yes.
That just is that aren't super relatable for young girls. So I think I totally went on a tangent there with that
It
question.
makes perfect sense. My mother was more like crunchy granola, and we weren't allowed to like Barbies.
Yeah, Barbie, I love Monster High. And just, I think all of these dolls were older than us, and the American Girl dolls, unlike them, kind of showed us at our own ages, which was nice.
We had another question back there. I don't know if they got an answer to that.
Oh, yeah, I'm curious, sorry. I don't know if you've already said this, but you mentioned how long it took you, but like all in all from A to Z, how long did it take you, and how much of the time did you was it?
So this started off as my art lab project. I was in the self-portraiture, or just regular portraiture class at the beginning of the semester, and Johnny was like, how do you see yourself? And it was kind of a joke, but I was like, American Girl doll. And so I started making this magazine for my art project, and that took up the whole trimester. About each of the dolls, there's obviously a waiting period for me to get the doll and the clothing itself. I'd say the research for just the doll itself would be a couple of hours, and then finding additional information about them. So for Catherine Switzer, that was other women in running, and then actually making the pages. I don't know how to quantify this all the way. A lot of hours. A lot of hours. But it did take a bit, but it was very fun, to be honest. It was a whole lot of pink, which I enjoyed. I think I often found myself doing this instead of my calculus homework.
How many places did you take that doll?
So many places. I took it to school a lot. I took it to Maine. I took it to Michigan. I had the girls' track team take it to their meet. I took it to school for Susan and Cuddy. I used Annie's mom's dance studio to take photos of Rita Marino. Lots of places. And I was met with fun reactions from people in public when I was carrying a doll around. Oh, I took it to Mozart's coffee shop. Lots of places, yes.
One last question, and then
Yeah, I was just curious, do you dance? Because I was looking at the little outfits, the Scarlett doll outfits.
Yeah, I did ballet for a while.
well, I just want to say that I'm super proud of Scarlett, and I hope that y'all will share, everyone who wasn't in this presentation, you'll let them know about the QR codes. We're going to put them up so they can scan and see all of her hard work. Two things I want to mention is that as a history teacher, so many girls that then come to my classroom only know about history through an American Girl doll that then they read, and so it's like really, it's a big deal, and I love that you made this pink and beautiful and girly, because I do think there's this stereotype that history has to be like serious and boring and dark and whatever, and I love that this is a way that we can explore this too. So let's give Scarlett a huge round of applause.